Streaming now.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi bringing you this special broadcast of top stories from our studios here in the national capital. We have an expansive list of stories to cover. Of course, we will be touching upon the global developments. Why is China asking Argentina to not cut ties with it? We'll also touch upon some climate stories as well. A potential volcanic eruption that's pending in Iceland as well. But first and foremost, we're going to shift our focus to the West Asian conflict. It's the 47th day, major developments taking place there. Let's cut right across to what's happening in the Israel-Hamas war. The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being. Now, the war between Israel and Hamas has entered its 47th day. Meanwhile, this is the latest that we're picking up from the war front. The Israeli government voted to back a deal for Palestinian Hamas terrorists to free up to 50 women and children that are held as hostages in Gaza. This in exchange for a 4-day pause in fighting. Now, the hostages released in exchange for about the release of 150 Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails. The Times of Israel has been reporting that the ceasefire is going to at least last 4 days. This, even as the reports are suggesting that the deal includes around 308 trucks per day to enter Gaza from Egypt via the Rafah crossing. Hospitals, on the other hand of the divide in Israel, are preparing to receive the hostages that are going to be released. Now, in terms of the death toll, 13,300 Palestinians have been killed, out of which more than 5,000 are children, according to the Gaza's health ministry. 68 Israeli Defense Forces soldiers have been killed in the ground operation. And this, even as Israel says WHO ignored terror activity at Gaza's largest medical compound, the Al-Shifa hospital. In terms of international diplomacy around it, now that the hostages release has almost been voted upon, it's almost done. Saudi Crown Prince has called upon all countries to stop arms to export weaponry to Israel. And Vladimir Putin, speaking at the BRICS Summit, said that the BRICS panel could help reach political settlement in the Gaza conflict. South Africa's Ramaphosa also accused Israel of war crimes and genocide in Gaza at the BRICS Summit. But right at the top of the news hour, and it seems like it's taken 47 days. Many people are calling it too little, too late, but better late than never. Those are two phrases that are sort of going head to head in this particular situation. In a significant development, the Israeli government has given the green light to a deal resulting in the release of 50 hostages from the Gaza Strip. According to the Times of Israel, this marks a notable shift, with Israel agreeing to a ceasefire for at least 4 days, the first since the outbreak of the war. The report suggests the potential release of 30 more hostages, extending the pause by a day for every group of 10 additional hostages that are located and freed. Earlier, Israeli media had reported that the deal was approved. The first release of hostages is expected on Thursday, but this is something that hasn't been corroborated so far. The delay is because if the deal is agreed to, which it has been now by the war cabinet, there must be a 24-hour waiting period before it is implemented. Why? Well, to give Israeli citizens the chance to ask the Supreme Court to block the release of Palestinian prisoners. And notably, only 3 cabinet ministers opposed the deal, all belonging to the religious Zionism party. Now that the deal has been approved, the initial release of hostages is expected by Thursday, following a mandatory 24-hour waiting period for Israeli citizens to potentially challenge the release through the Supreme Court of Israel. Now, in preparations for the released hostages, 6 hospitals in Israel are readying designated compounds to receive them separately from other patients and the media, as being reported by the Israeli media portals. Moreover, the deal encompasses an agreement by Israel to permit around 308 trucks daily to enter Gaza from Egypt, along with additional fuel provisions. Meanwhile, the full statement on the deal from the Israeli government goes on as follows. These are the key highlights. The government of Israel is obligated to return home all of the hostages. Tonight, the government has approved the outline of the first stage of achieving this goal, according to which at least 50 hostages, women and children, will be released over the next 4 days, during which a pause in the fighting will be held. The release of every additional 10 hostages will result in 1 additional day in the pause. Now, the government of Israel, the IDF and the security services will continue the war in order to return home all of the hostages, complete the elimination of Hamas, and ensure that there will be no new threat to the state of Israel from Gaza. This is a significant development, ladies and gentlemen. The Israeli government has given the green light to a deal resulting in the release of 50 hostages from Gaza. This, according to the Times of Israel and various other media global reports as well. It is marking a notable shift, with Israel now agreeing to a ceasefire for at least 4 days, the first ceasefire, the first pause in fighting since the outbreak of the war. We have a reaction coming from the Israeli Prime Minister, who says that the war is going to continue and extinction of Hamas is an objective that is still right at the top.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל, כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו, אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה, ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו. במלחמה יש שלבים, וגם בהשבת החטופים יש שלבים. אבל אנחנו לא נרפה עד שנשיג את הניצחון המוחלט ועד שנחזיר את כולם. עכשיו לפנינו הערב החלטה קשה, אבל היא ההחלטה הנכונה. כל גורמי הביטחון תומכים בה באופן מלא. הם הבהירו במלוא הערכתם המקצועית שביטחון כוחותינו יובטח בימי ההפוגה ושהמאמץ המודיעיני יישמר בימים אלה.
Now, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, along with the Defense Minister, of course, Yoav Gallant, and Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, they held this particular meeting yesterday evening. The meeting was called upon to discuss the hostage release deal, pictures on your screens as well, which should clear the way for the release of some of the hostages that Hamas terrorists took to the Gaza Strip during the October 7th onslaught. Now, in a recorded message right at the start of the government meeting, Netanyahu said that the war would continue until Israel achieved all its goals. You just heard the man speak the same thing. Speaking after the presentation, the still undisclosed details of the deal to his war cabinet and the wider national security cabinet, Netanyahu told his government it was in fact a difficult decision, but the right decision, and would enable Israel to go on carrying on fighting Hamas. The complete extinction of Hamas is something that is of grave importance here. Now, it's again significant to note that 3 United States citizens that are held by Hamas are going to be released as part of the deal, according to United States officials. 3 Americans that have been held by Hamas in Gaza are going to be among the 50 hostages that are going to be released by the Islamist Palestinian group under this particular deal. The 3 include a 3-year-old girl whose parents were among the more than 1,200 people killed in Hamas's initial October 7th attack on southern Israel. The official, speaking to reporters on condition of anonymity, has said that it was likely that more than 50 hostages, when 50 hostages largely comprising of women and children, will be released once a pause in fighting takes hold. The hostage group will include 2 American women and an American girl who will turn 4 on Friday, expecting her birthday on Friday as well. Initial releases of hostages are expected within 24 hours of the deal's announcement. The first with the first likely to be freed on Thursday morning, according to the United States official. The United States official on anonymity, speaking to reporters, has also said on record, says, I would say at least 50 of the women and children over a period of 4 to 5 days are going to be released, without providing details of any other nationalities that are expected to release, particularly as part of the deal. We know 3 United States Americans are going to be the first 50 hostages that are going to be released from Hamas. Now that the cabinet and this government panel has given the green light to this particular deal, 50 hostages over the next 4 days, at least 4 days of ceasefire, the first pause in the fighting. What's going to happen next? Does this mean that this is finally the decline in fighting in this Israel-Hamas war? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Let's quickly listen in to the Israeli Prime Minister once again. He's talking about all the nonsense talk, quote unquote, that's happening around, outside Israel, and what he wants is the best for the security of the state of Israel. Let's quickly listen in to what Netanyahu said again.
יש בחוץ דיבורי הבל. כאילו אחרי ההפוגה להשבת חטופינו, אנחנו נפסיק את המלחמה. אז אני מבקש להבהיר, אנחנו במלחמה, ונמשיך במלחמה. נמשיך במלחמה עד שנשיג את כל היעדים שלנו. במלחמה יש שלבים, וגם בהשבת החטופים יש שלבים. אבל אנחנו לא נרפה עד שנשיג את הניצחון המוחלט, ועד שנחזיר את כולם. עכשיו לפנינו הערב החלטה קשה, אבל היא ההחלטה הנכונה. כל גורמי הביטחון תומכים בה, באופן מלא. הם הבהירו במלוא הערכתם המקצועית, שביטחון כוחותינו יובטח בימי ההפוגה, ושהמאמץ המודיעיני יישמר בימים אלה.
A significant development. The families of all the people that have been taken hostage in the Gaza Strip, their loved ones, their family members, they've been gathering. They've been taken to the streets. An entire 5-day march took place from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, to where exactly Benjamin Netanyahu actually lives. There was a protest that took place right outside the Defense Ministry. There are everyday protests that are taking place right outside the Israel Museum of Art as well. People holding up placards just like the ones that you see on your screens, with pictures of their loved ones who have now been taken hostage inside the Gaza Strip. Finally, the war cabinet, this particular meeting of the Israeli government, they have given a green light to this particular deal. A deal that comprises 50 hostages that are going to be released by the Hamas, largely comprising of women and children, in exchange to about 150 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. These are the key highlights of the government statement. Now, the government has come out and said that it is committed to bringing all the hostages back home. And even as it does so, the government has approved the first stage, the initial stage of this particular deal. There is a release plan. The release plan encompasses at least 50 hostages, including women and children, to be released by the Hamas. And the duration of the ceasefire is going to be about 4 days of pause in fighting, which is the first ever since the conflict broke out. Release of every additional 10 hostages may extend the pause, is what the Israeli government statement is also telling us. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that efforts are going to continue. Israel, IDF and security services will continue their war against Israel. The overall goal is simple, as Netanyahu puts it: ensure the return of all hostages and the extinction of Hamas. This is the Israel's full statement on the hostage deal. The release of every additional 10 hostages will result in 1 additional day of fighting, 1 additional day of pause in the fighting. The government of Israel, the IDF, which is the Israeli military, and the security service are going to continue with this particular war. The government of Israel is obligated to return home all of the hostages. Israel says release of more hostages will mean longer pause in the fighting, ladies and gentlemen. We're picking through the statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office directly. And this is what we're learning. Even as the fighting is continuing, It says, as part of the deal, the release of every additional 10 hostages will result in one additional day of pause in the fighting. The Israeli government and the Israeli cabinet, ladies and gentlemen, has approved the hostage deal. It has voted to approve the hostage deal with Hamas following more than 6 weeks of intense fighting across the Gaza Strip. Visual ordeal, the tumultuous time that the families and the loved ones of all those that have been taken hostage by the Hamas in the Gaza Strip are having to go through. Global calls, the chorus for the release of hostages and humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip has been ongoing. Meanwhile, even as the fighting continues in Gaza, the Hamas-run health ministry has said that almost 13,500 plus people have now been killed during Israel's bombarding campaign, including more than 5,000 of them being children. Well, now, Israeli army has released visuals showing forces pushing further into the Gaza Strip, including what the army said was an anti-tank missile found under a baby's crib in a Palestinian home in Hamas-controlled territory. Meanwhile, there was a BRICS summit that took place, a BRICS summit that focused exactly on what was happening in the Gaza Strip. Cyril Ramaphosa calling out war crimes and genocide at the hands of Israel in the Gaza Strip. Xi Jinping putting out that plan of how a two-state formula might be the best one out there, and Vladimir Putin telling the world that this BRICS panel might be the potential political panel you need to call for that ceasefire in the Strip. Take a look at this next report for more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday said the BRICS group of developing nations could help with a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The comments came during a televised summit where Putin again blamed the Middle East crisis on the failure of U.S. diplomacy.
We call for joint efforts of the international community aimed at de-escalating the situation, a ceasefire, and finding a political solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And the BRICS states and countries of the region could play a key role in this work.
He did not explain how any effort might be organized. Russian and Western policy experts say Putin is trying to use the Gaza crisis to his advantage, as part of a strategy to court allies in developing countries. Calls for a ceasefire were also echoed by BRICS chair, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
As South Africa, we call for, first, an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. We believe that BRICS has a vital role and a voice in a widespread international effort to achieve a just and lasting peace.
The BRICS group includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In August, it agreed to expand by adding Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the UAE, in a move aimed at accelerating its push to reshuffle a Western-dominated world order it sees as outdated.
And now, like I mentioned before, the Israeli army released those visuals showing the forces pushing further into the Gaza Strip, including what the army said was an anti-tank missile that was found under a baby's crib in a Palestinian home in the Hamas-controlled territory. IDF pushing further into their expansive ground operation inside the Gaza Strip, now moving towards the south. Visuals coming across from Zaytun in Gaza, an anti-tank missile that was found under a baby's crib. These are visuals of them carrying out those search operations as well. And inside over there, underneath a baby's crib, is what the IDF alleges are anti-tank missiles. Take a look at that. Meanwhile, terrorist organization Hamas's entity is not just limited to its military capabilities or ideological influence, but also its complex financial network. Now, Hamas is estimated to generate over $1 billion annually from its various businesses, and this in turn helps to overcome the challenges the terror organization faces because of the economic sanctions imposed on it by the West, particularly the United States. Now, Hamas's monetary operations involve various business ventures, including mining companies and money laundering schemes, which actively contribute to its income. What is significant is that Hamas's financial infrastructure largely exists outside that of the Gaza Strip, and its resources enable it to maintain a formidable military presence in Gaza. Now, going just by media reports, each year around $360 million comes from import taxes on goods that are brought into Gaza from the West Bank or, well, Egypt. Reports also suggest that a much larger amount is estimated to be around $750 million per year that comes from entities which are based overseas. Israeli officials claim that the main source of funding for Hamas's current stockpile of arms and fuel comes from friendly governments, the biggest of which is, of course, Iran. Now, millions of dollars flow to Hamas through crypto markets as well. Crypto mining, crypto funding is something that the Hamas also deals in heavily. And take a look at this. Tens of Palestinian patients were evacuated late on Monday from Gaza's Indonesian hospital to Al-Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis towards the south portion of the strip. Gaza's health ministry has said that at least 12 Palestinians were killed and dozens were wounded by firing into an Indonesian-built hospital that was encircled by Israeli tanks. Israel says it shot back at fighters who opened fire from the windows of the hospital. Meanwhile, visuals that you can see of all the patients that are now being transported to Al-Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. And in Khan Yunis, it's again cacophony, catastrophe. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, trucks carrying building blocks for a Jordanian field hospital, they rolled into Gaza's Khan Yunis. With many hospitals in Gaza unable to function, volunteers worked to set up the facility. It's reported to compromise 2 entire hospitals, one for trauma injuries and another equipped with 40 incubators to care for premature babies as well. And shifting our focus to some other top international developments as well. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that it would be a serious mistake if Argentina's diplomacy, if the South American nation were to cut ties with major countries like China or Brazil. Now, China is an important trading partner for Argentina, and its elected government attaches great importance to relations with China. Chinese Foreign Ministry, according to spokesperson Mao Ning, who said this at a regular news conference.
据我了解，你提到的内容与俄新社网站公布的采访内容有出入。蒙迪诺在采访中表示，外界对当选总统米莱的外交政策存在误读，没有哪个国家可以脱离外交关系来发展经贸合作。如果阿根廷同中国或巴西这样的大国断绝联系，将是阿根廷外交的严重错误。
Meanwhile, even as Xi Jinping has said that it's going to be difficult for Argentina if it in fact cuts its ties with big countries like China and Brazil, the global far right, Argentina, is ecstatic about Javier Milei's resounding election triumph in Argentina, a victory that experts anticipate will transform Buenos Aires into a burgeoning hub for the radical populist right. Now, take a look at this. Trump and former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who are eyeing a return to power in 2024 in the United States and in Brazil, respectively, expressed joy over Milei's success. Milei has already announced plans to travel to the United States and Israel after the victory, with a pledge to relocate Argentina's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And political background for Milei. Let's understand that as well. Milei was born in 1970 and made his mark by transitioning from a member of a Rolling Stones cover band to, well, a politician, blaring rock music that you can hear as well. His journey in the political arena has been notable. Renowned for his outspoken and occasionally controversial economic commentary on Argentinian television, Milei secured a seat in the Congress back in the year 2021, representing the Libertarian Party, Libertad Avanza. His eccentric and unconventional style earned him the nickname El Loco, the Madman. Now, not just Trump or Bolsonaro, even Portugal's André Ventura has praised Milei's struggle to defend society. Italy's Salvini, Spain's Abascal, and Hungary's Novak have also extended their congratulations as well. Now, analyzing Milei's electoral success is also of grave significance. Milei achieved a sweeping victory in 21 of Argentina's 23 provinces, but narrowly lost in Buenos Aires, a Peronist stronghold. Experts have advised against viewing it as a major conservative shift, suggesting voters expressed discontent with the Peronists amid economic crisis. Now, Javier Milei, an Argentine libertarian, secured a significant victory in the presidential runoff election, vowing to usher in a new era for the country. With voters pinning their hopes on this political outsider, the focus lies on addressing the country's challenges: triple-digit inflation, an impending recession, and increasing poverty, all in need of urgent resolution.
Argentina elected the right-wing libertarian Javier Milei as its new president on Sunday. Voters rolled the dice on an outsider with radical views to fix an economy battered by runaway inflation, giving Milei, an economist and former TV pundit, a clear win with 56% of the ballots. He appears to have successfully harnessed a wave of public anger with Argentina's political mainstream.
Today brings an end to the impoverishing model of the omnipresent state that only benefits some while the majority of Argentines suffer. Today we retake the path that made this country great. Today we embrace the ideas of libertarianism.
Milei's rival, Economy Minister Sergio Massa, conceded before official results were out. In a speech that lightly veiled his centrist concerns over Milei, Massa said Argentina expected the new president to, quote, provide certainty and guarantees to the functioning of political, social and economic systems. Yet it is Milei's promise to shake everything up that seems to have lured these celebrating supporters to his camp.
Argentina needed a change, and that's why I bet on this new proposal.
I want a change for my country that I deeply love. We've been suffering many years of decadence, and this seemed to me like a good option. No more of the same. Enough already with Peronism. We already know them.
The challenges facing Milei are enormous, from the government and central bank's empty coffers to a $44 billion debt program with the International Monetary Fund and inflation nearing 150%. He's pledging economic shock therapy with plans to shut the central bank, ditch the peso for the dollar, and slash spending, pushing for minimal state intervention in line with the libertarian ethos. He used to carry around a chainsaw in a symbol of his planned cuts, but shelved it in recent weeks in favor of a more moderate image. The eccentric 53-year-old is also staunchly anti-abortion, backs looser gun laws, and has criticized the progressive Pope Francis. Milei faces a highly fragmented Congress with no single bloc having a majority. This means he will need backing from other factions to push through legislation. After October's first-round vote, Milei struck an uneasy alliance with the country's main conservative bloc. That helped him win middle-ground voters on Sunday, but it could also put the reins on some of his more extreme plans.
And moving on, 3 people were killed and 8 were wounded in overnight Russian missile attacks and shelling in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. Missiles hit a hospital in the Donetsk town of Selidov and a coal mine. Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko has also said the same and corroborated these reports on the Telegram messaging service.
You might not be able to fulfill an earlier
Meanwhile, this is what we're picking up. Germany is going to support Ukraine with another military aid package worth 1.3 billion euros that will include an additional IRIS-T air defense unit.
I have the honor and the pleasure to announce a new package for my visit here, and in this package is included, of course, another 4 further systems of IRIS-T SLM. Included is artillery ammunition of 155 and panzer defense mines. So we are altogether, it's a package of 1.3 billion euros, and I'm quite sure this is the 5th package since last winter. This will help you in your fight against the Russian aggression.
Meanwhile, in a video message commemorating the Day of Dignity and Freedom, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that Ukrainians will not allow their freedom to be taken away.
Today we celebrate the Day of Dignity and Freedom. It is a public holiday established to commemorate the beginning of 2 revolutions, the 2004 revolution and the Revolution of Dignity 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we started a new page of struggle. 10 years ago, Ukrainians launched their first counteroffensive against unlawfulness, against attempts to deprive us of our European future, against our subjugation. Year after year, step after step, we do everything to ensure that our star shines in the circle of stars on the EU flag, which symbolizes the unity of the peoples of Europe. The star of Ukraine. 20 years ago, it was a romantic dream. 10 years ago, an ambitious goal. And today, a reality in which it is impossible to stop our progress and the completion of all the mandatory stages. Therefore, our candidate status and further accession negotiations should definitely finish with Ukraine's full membership in the EU. And we are doing all this despite the war, when our people are defending themselves and Europe right now, because we have dignity and will not allow our freedom to be taken away from us.
And well, next up, shifting our focus to stories from back home. What's happening on the domestic chessboard? What's happening on the political chessboard? How are pieces moving? But first and foremost, let's quickly cut across to Uttarkashi, where actually all the 41 trapped workers inside that Selkyara tunnel, it's day 11 of the Uttarkashi tunnel rescue. These are the latest updates that we're bringing to you. 2 kilometers of tunnel has already been made, and we're trying to access some workers from the Barkot side as well. You have the Selkyara side, and then you have the Barkot side on the other hand. Five global experts are at the site to advise and are taking full part in the rescue operations. These trapped workers have ample space and lighting is also available. There is enough oxygen. However, mental trauma is something that needs to be looked at. Meanwhile, a 4-inch pipe is available since the beginning of the collapse for transfer of food, for transfer of all the basic resources, and that endoscopic camera that also went in. Meanwhile, survival rations are being pushed through a compressor. This even as a 6-inch pipe has now successfully made its way from the Selkyara side into the rubble as well. But even as we're looking at the visuals that are now trickling in on the 11th day of the tunnel rescue process, this is that road that you see that the BRO and the Indian Army are constructing for the drilling machine, which is going to vertically bore into the tunnel to where the workers are trapped. This is the road, this 320-meter long road that goes right on top of the tunnel. this has been made. Now the machinery is making its way right up to the top. Accuracy is of utmost importance in any case if you're drilling or boring vertically from the top. The focus is now on the rescue operations in Uttarkashi is on the horizontal drilling to rescue trapped workers from the tunnel. A 6-inch food pipeline was laid yesterday at the Selkyara tunnel in Uttarkashi and has since become fully functional. About 5 to 10 kilograms each of different fruits like apples, oranges, sweet lime and 5 dozen bananas have been successfully delivered inside. Antidepressants, multivitamins, you name it. Even as the work continues to go on, yesterday was a great day. Yesterday, for the first time, we got visuals of the endoscopic camera. We got visuals of the workers. We saw their faces. Everybody was wearing a hard hat. Take a look at that. Visuals from yesterday. The officials on the outside trying to speak to the tunnel workers, the trapped workers who are inside the tunnel right now, trapped inside. Everybody was standing on their feet. These visuals more positive than what people initially thought them out to be. Later, food like khichdi and roti, sabzi were also given to the trapped workers. The food was prepared under the supervision of a doctor so that it is easily digestible. The Indian Air Force flew in further 18 tons of load from Rourkela to Dehradun. Specialist equipment is also being flown in from Bengaluru. Rescue workers say that there is sufficient water, oxygen, power and light inside the tunnel. A few families of the trapped workers have been transported and they spoke to the men trapped inside the tunnel. Survival rations, medicines and other essentials are being pushed through that compressor into the space where the workers are currently trapped. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi will chair the virtual G20 Leaders Summit. During the closing session of the New Delhi G20 Summit in September, Prime Minister Modi announced that India would be hosting a virtual summit before the conclusion of India's G20 presidency. Now, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that leaders of all G20 members, including the chair of the African Union, have been invited. 9 guest countries and heads of 11 international organizations have also been invited. Meanwhile, it is speculated that Vladimir Putin might join the virtual summit, while there is no confirmation on whom the Chinese will be sending in. And taking a look at some political developments as well, Shiv Sena UBT leader and party's chief whip Sunil Prabhu was cross-examined on Tuesday in the case related to disqualification of MLAs of the undivided Shiv Sena. Now, Prabhu was cross-examined by the lawyers representing the Shiv Sena led by Chief Minister Eknath Shinde. Shiv Sena UBT MLC Anil Parab said that cross-examination will continue on Wednesday as well. Now, Prabhu had demanded that his statement be recorded in Marathi. He also sought an official translator who could record his statement after alleging that it was not being done correctly. The apex court had come down hard on the Speaker of the Maharashtra Assembly over the delay in deciding in the pleas filed by Uddhav Thackeray faction for disqualification of Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and several members of legislative assemblies that were loyal to him, saying that the Speaker cannot defeat orders of the top court. Similar disqualification petitions have also been filed by the Shinde bloc against lawmakers owing allegiance to Thackeray. Now, Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde said granting reservation to the Maratha community without touching the quota of other sections is the responsibility of his government, and work is going on war footing on that front. Shinde was speaking to reporters in Kolhapur after visiting the famous Ambabai temple. However, an Elgar rally that saw the participation of 374 communities have opposed quotas for the Marathas. And the Maratha agitation and the Maratha quota stir is something that has been making the headlines. Meanwhile, shifting our focus again, Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis had released a video footage on Monday showing armed men dropping from a helicopter and seizing a cargo ship down below in the southern Red Sea. Here's a report. Take a look.
Houthi rebels from Yemen were seen storming a cargo ship in the Red Sea in a video released by the Iran-backed group on Monday. Its fighters appeared to land by helicopter onto the top deck. They brandished weapons at the ship's crew and ordered them to lie down. The seized ship, the Galaxy Leader, is now in Yemen's Hodeidah port area, according to its owner, Galaxy Maritime, which is registered in the Isle of Man. The Houthi movement claims the Galaxy Leader has links to Israel. However, Israel has denied this and says the seized ship was British-owned and Japanese-operated. The owner confirmed the ship was illegally boarded on Sunday. Its crew of 25 is made up of nationals from Bulgaria, Ukraine, the Philippines, and other countries. All communications have since been cut with the vessel. The Houthis are a group aligned with Iran that have emerged as a major military force in the Arabian Peninsula. Last week, the leaders said they would target Israeli ships in the Red Sea and said attacks would continue until, quote, Israeli aggression, referring to the war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, is stopped. A representative from Hamas thanked the Houthis for seizing the ship. He called it a welcome step in support of the Palestinian people. The United States on Monday denounced the seizure. It said it was a breach of international law and demanded the Houthis immediately release the vessel and its crew.
And moving on, China's biggest internet search engine provider, Baidu, on Tuesday beat the third quarter revenue estimates, helped by stronger advertising income as Chinese economy shows signs of recovery.
China's top search engine is doing better than expected, and that might be a good sign for the country's economy. Baidu said Tuesday that third quarter revenue came in at just over $4.7 billion. That was just ahead of analyst estimates. The company benefited as ad spending rose amid signs of a wider upturn. China's economy is set to expand 5.4% this year, according to forecasts from the International Monetary Fund this month. That's an increase on its earlier forecast, encouraging companies to spend more on marketing. Baidu also beat forecasts on profit. The company is among one of many in China engaged in a fierce war to win the local market for AI services. Boss Robin Lee said earlier this month that the country risked duplication of effort and a huge waste of resources as a result. He urged firms to focus on developing practical applications for the technology. Baidu's own bot, dubbed Ernie, was open to public use in August. An updated version was then unveiled last month.
And take a look at this. Transgender women in Italy sat down for lunch with Pope Francis on the weekend, participating in marking the church's World Day for the Poor. For women from a rundown beach town near the Vatican, the sit-down represented the culmination of a rapprochement with the Catholic Church that began during the pandemic.
These transgender women in Italy are about to sit down for lunch with Pope Francis. Carla Segovia says it's very exciting. They're joining more than 1,000 others on the Catholic Church's World Day of the Poor. It was an invite that seemed almost impossible until a rapprochement with the church that began during the global health crisis. The 86-year-old Pope Francis has tried to make the church more welcoming to the LGBT community without changing its teachings. Last week, the Vatican's doctrinal office said transgender people can receive baptism and be godparents at them too. They can also be witnesses at religious weddings. Segovia says those changes give her strength.
I think the fact that Pope Francis today allows us to approach baptism with this legislation, or to perhaps take care of our best friend's child, or of friends who ask us to be godfather or godmother, is something that makes us transgender people feel more human.
While LGBT rights advocates in the church welcomed the move, conservatives condemned it. They're accusing Francis of sending confusing signals about sexual morality to the faithful. The women live in a rundown beach town about 20 miles south of the Vatican. During the pandemic, while many were strapped for cash, the local parish reached out to the cardinal that runs the Pope's charities. Along with money, the cardinal arranged for help with food and vaccinations. Claudia Victoria Salas is originally from Argentina and a former sex worker.
We came to Father Andrea's church to ask for help. From that moment, Father Andrea always helped us. He opened the door. He brought us food. From there, our friendship was born, as they say in Italian.
She's referring to the parish's pastor, Father Andrea Conachia, or she calls him Saint Andrea. He says the women feel like beloved daughters. His parish's pandemic help eventually led to Sunday's lunch invite. Conachia also attended, arriving on a bus with the women as well as dozens of poor people from the parish. Out of all of the attendees, Salas found herself sitting right across from the Pope himself. She says she feels grateful and fulfilled.
For me, it is a bit difficult to answer because I think we already have everything. We cannot ask for more. Because thanks to Pope Francis, we have everything. We must not be selfish. We must be patient. I am 55 years old. I have waited all my life, and now I have everything I need.
OpenAI named ex-Twitch boss Emmett Shear as interim CEO, while outgoing chief Sam Altman moved to backer Microsoft MSFT.O, in a surprise turn of events that clouded the future at the startup at the heart of the artificial intelligence boom.
OpenAI's recently fired CEO Sam Altman is taking a position at Microsoft, while his former firm has named Emmett Shear, who was once the boss of the video game streaming service Twitch, as its new interim chief executive. The C-suite staff shakeup capped a tumultuous weekend for the startup, synonymous with the artificial intelligence boom. The appointments, which settled late Sunday, followed Altman's abrupt ousting just days earlier as the CEO of the ChatGPT maker and ended speculation he could return. Microsoft is an investor in OpenAI, and Altman's move, along with another OpenAI co-founder, helps the software giant keep key talent away from rivals like Google and Amazon. Microsoft shares rose 2% in Monday afternoon trading and hit an all-time high. The startup's newly appointed interim boss moved quickly to dismiss speculation that OpenAI's board ousted Altman due to a spat over the safety of powerful AI models. Shear vowed to open an investigation into his predecessor's firing. The startup dismissed Altman on Friday after what an internal memo seen by Reuters characterized as a breakdown of communications. On Monday, stakes rose further. According to a letter seen by Reuters, a member of the OpenAI board and nearly 500 employees threatened to leave the company unless the board stepped down and reinstated Altman and another former executive. OpenAI did not immediately respond to a request for comment. A source familiar with the matter said employees of OpenAI, which is governed by a nonprofit, are split between different ideals. Some are focused on building artificial intelligence and against moving too fast without sufficient guardrails, while others recruited after the success of ChatGPT are more interested in quickly building and launching products akin to the traditional idea of a Silicon Valley startup, the source said.
Meanwhile, in the small village of Sesklo in central Greece, Vasilis Siamitas has experienced the extremes of unusual weather this summer, turning Greece into a hotspot for climate change.
The devastation from recent natural disasters in central Greece was clearly visible outside the home of Vasilis Siamitas and his family in the village of Sesklo. After 2 rainstorms in September, a bridge across this stream was destroyed and water supply lines were uprooted. The family car was swept away too. But Siamitis, who is a farmer and businessman, said that's only part of what his family has endured, as the area also experienced a wildfire in July that scorched their almond grove.
There is nothing else that can happen to me. That is, my fields were burned, my house almost burned down, 2 shops, the 2 businesses that I own were flooded, my house was flooded, I'm a flood victim. I don't have a car. What else can I say? There is nothing else.
The storms killed at least 16 people and turned the area into an inland sea, destroying homes, farms, and wiping out swaths of crops. Vasilis and the rest of his family were trapped in the house for 24 hours, but were not hurt. Their crops, including these almond trees, had already been decimated by the fire 2 months earlier that burned for 2 days. It occurred during a summer when Greece had its longest heat wave in 30 years.
The weather conditions were so bad, the wind, there was no humidity that day. The fire was moving fast. There was not enough time to do anything.
Siamitis said the trees need to be uprooted and new ones need to be planted. It will take them 5 years to produce a crop. It is becoming a part of life here as fierce storms and floods have become more frequent in recent years, making Greece a climate change hotspot.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Top Stories. News and updates continues on the other side. Keep watching News 9 Live.